I guess pretty important that I caught the last couple of minutes of Dan's talk there when it comes to buying a really expensive TV. These are all the things that you guys can do to help them actually maximize what's going on with the TV by figuring out what's going on with their eyeballs. Okay, so I don't have any financial disclosures. Okay, so what are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out what the surface is doing, what it's telling us, and not trying to just wade into an exam room in the dark going, why can't I get this refraction under control? Topography can really give you a good inroads into that. One of my first questions when it came to the quiz you guys took is what's the responsibility of the cornea? What does it give you? It gives you 2/3 of the power of the eye. So keep that in mind. 2/3 of your problems can be coming from the front surface of the eye that's staring you right in the face. And if you're not looking at it, you're not measuring it, you're not doing anything with it, and all you're doing is flipping through lenses and not pulling back and saying, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. Maybe I should stop and do something different. Then you may be missing a really great piece of information to help you have an easier time doing your jobs, because there's so many different things that can create problems for you. Diseases. Could stand here for 30 minutes and list the different diseases. I promise not to do that. Past surgical history, which hopefully is in the patient's chart. Any trauma, generally most patients have a really good idea if they got anything happen to their eye, they're going to be able to tell you that. Things you're not going to be able to really have a great understanding of: poor contact lens fit. Their eye might be red, but what's it doing to the surface? Is it a hard contact lens? Are they sleeping in the contact lens, not telling you? And one of the most common things is that surface dry? I can't tell you the number of times that my techs have come to me after doing a topography and been like, they've got dry eye. They haven't checked the vision yet. All they've done is a test. And why that is because what they're actually looking at when they're doing a topography. So what is topography? Well, topography is basically been going on for a long time in some pretty rudimentary ways when it came to Schneider basically reflecting marbles off of somebody's cornea. Okay, so way back then, people had an understanding that something was going on, but they were trying to figure it out what was happening. Placido discs, on the other hand, those came around about 1880, and basically using, instead of a big marble, we've got small rings. So the example that you guys are probably actually seeing of some interesting topography every day as you're scrolling through, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, any of those, is those ring lights that everybody's using. That's one single Placido disc. So if you guys ever see a video and you see a big distortion with one Placido disc, that person's got a huge problem, okay? Because what we're working with is very, very small linear circles to create this. Does anybody else know what else came out in 1880? It's been remarketed to solve your presbyopia recently. Pilocarpine. We've been using pilocarpine since 1880. Okay, that's how long that medication has been around. So, okay, so what's out there? So these are all different ways in which we can actually check the topography, from small handhelds to our big desktops to research ones that remind me way too much of a light bright, of different ways to check what's going on the surface. Many of these which we have here, we have the Galilei, which is down in the lower left-hand corner. Next to it is the Pentacam. Above that is the Orb Scan. So most of these all have that Placido ring technology. Keep in mind that was brought about in 1880. So if I can say that something stood the test of time, it would be the Placido rings. Those work really well. So how is it possible that my tech can come to me and say, this patient's got dry eye? When they're taking the image, they see this. That's the view that shows up when they're diagnostically doing it. So does anybody have any idea of what this patient might have? My technicians are not allowed to answer. So this is a patient. Any guesses? Anybody want to fathom a guess of what we got going on here? Long eyelashes. True, yes. And so there we go. So we have a female patient with long eyelashes that had a surgery back in the late 70s, early 80s. Well, if I overlay this with this patient's topography, we get all of these little scalloped edges. This is RK. A lot of you are seeing RK patients coming back into your offices because there's a couple of things with RK. Their corneas keep flattening, so you can track that with topography. You'll notice a hyperopic shift when you're doing refraction, but at the same time, what else are these patients getting? Cataracts. Yeah. Any of your surgeons run out the door when you say you have somebody with RK that needs cataract surgery? All of them, most of them. But not every single one of them, because these are very difficult patients to manage, because that's the surface that they're working with. They've got to put a lens in that's going to work with that. It's not the easiest thing. It's actually quite difficult, because they will continue to progress and flatten, and you certainly cannot promise a patient that's had RK that after cataract surgery they're not going to need glasses, and you can track it using topography. Okay. So that's what that surface looks like. So that's just with Placido imagery. How are we able to take this to the next level? Well, this is where we started to include different optical ways of also measuring it, because the Placido imagery will get you this front surface, but don't forget there's a back surface of the cornea, there's a thickness to the cornea, and all of those things actually matter, and not every single piece of equipment can measure those. So with our Galilei system, basically they utilize two Scheimpflug analyzers to basically be able to take a video of it. The dual versus the single is basically the Pentacam versus the Galilei. Those create, basically a little bit of differences, but we're actually now able to start taking measurements of the front surface, of the back surface, and of the entire volume of the cornea without having to guess at lots of things. A lot of the other systems that first came into play, like the orb scan, was using a light beam and it was calculating a lot of stuff. With the Scheimpflug systems, we are now actually measuring that stuff that we were calculating before, which is always a good thing. The downside to when it comes to the difference between Galilei and Pentacam does not have the Placido imagery, so you miss out on a little bit of information there. Not that it's a bad system, it's sometimes you may need to get an additional test just in case. But there's been a ton of research dollars pumped into the Pentacam to make up for that loss, so it is a very robust system. So when we're looking at Galileis, we can kind of, take out a lot of the noise and think about pattern recognition. What are we looking for? So if somebody's got a spherical cornea and a spherical, prescription, and they don't have anything going on, you're going to be in the upper left-hand corner there where it's nice and round. The opposite of that is you've got perfect astigmatism in the lower right-hand corner. Anything in between is a little bit irregular. It's not totally abnormal to have an oval, shape. It's not so normal to have that superior steepening, and it's really not all that advantageous to have that inferior steepening. And then we have all these different irregularities of astigmatism that can lead us to think that something else might be going on with those corneas. So if you think of the kind of those general principles, it's like, okay, if it's round, it's normal. If it's got that perfect bow tie, it's normal. If it's something in between, then it might be worth noting, mentioning, and realizing. So for if you think of the symmetric bow tie that's got this kink over in the corner there, how's that going to affect your refraction? Could you read the axis right off the topography and say, oh, it's 180? No. And as it gets further away from that point, it can get even more confusing to figure that out. Although what you can generally do is kind of run a line right through the area of most effect and go 90 degrees away from that and start there. That's actually going to give you your best refinement from the get-go. Okay. On the bottom, I've got different kind of heat maps of the astigmatism. These are all regular patterns and just in different locations, because as we all know with astigmatism, it can be anywhere from 0 to 180 degrees, anywhere in between, and lots of different magnitudes. The good thing is that this helps us measure it. Because what does astigmatism tend to do as we get older? Does it stay static? No, changes. Okay. So your astigmatism patients over their arc of lifetime can go from with the rule and translate all the way over to against the rule as they go through about 8 decades of life. So it takes a long time, and it's really dictated by the lid mechanism. Okay, contact lens wear can influence it a little bit, but this doing a topography can help you get that jump start on that patient that comes in. I can't see well. I'm 40 years old and I've never worn a pair of glasses. Who had one of those this week? Everybody, right? So this is where it can kind of help you out, and they come in, they're a soft 20, 30 distance near all of that. So these are a couple of scans. Are these regular? How about yes and yes? Yes and yes. So we have regular astigmatism, and then we have a patient that has generally just a spherical. This is a -2 patient that came in for refractive surgery. That's a -2 with 3 diopters of astigmatism that came in wanting to have refractive surgery. Okay, so those are really pretty darn normal. How about these? Everybody like them? This one's got shifting up to the top. It's steeper up top. That's not exactly normal to see that, okay? But is it indicative of a problem? Not likely. It may have a lot to do with their contact lens wear. Admittedly, that patient was a contact lens wearer. We tell them to be out of their contact lenses for 2 weeks before their evaluation. They were out for 3 days. Technicians knew that before I walked in the room. Okay. So this is an imagery from our Galilei. The gaps that you see, those are where the cameras lie, and then it basically rotates that around so it can take its imagery. But this is a fine graded Placido imagery. Does everybody like this? I see my tech shaking their head. Nope. They don't like it. Why don't we like it? When we overlay the topography, anybody want to hazard a guess what this patient's got going on? Is that normal? Commonly missed, oftenly referred to me problem. This patient wakes up in the morning with sharp shooting, stabbing pains. Anybody know what it is now? This is a recurrent corneal erosion patient with underlying ABMD. Okay, all of the scalp edge, that's where their big line of anterior basement membrane dystrophy is elevating that surface. Their lid pulls that off in the morning. Okay, I hadn't even walked in the room. I knew what was going on. Okay, because my tech said, hey, look at this. So, and you can look at that surface and give that to the surgeon and say, okay, this is the area you got to go work on. Okay, because that basically gives you the guidelines. This whole quadrant over here looks perfect. You get into here, you see all these wiggles. That's the area of concern. That's where they've got to go get that. All right. Jen, you should know what this one is. So, anybody want to refract this patient? Nobody.
You have to every day.
You have to every day. Everybody wants to bow out on this patient. I appreciate that. This is a keratoconic that's coming in with active eye drops. The fact that we could actually get a scan on this patient was amazing. But that's a bad day for that patient. Okay. But that is how irregular that those corneas can look, how confused those Placido images can be. But I will also note, I've seen scans that look like this on severe dry eye, because when they blink, their surface just goes totally irregular. Well, if we think back to 2/3 of your vision coming from the surface, you've got a severe dry eye patient, they're out there driving, they forgot their drops, they got their defroster cranking, and they blink. 2/3 of their vision just went bye-bye. Okay. Those are the patients who come in like, I'm having a hard time driving. Why is that? Nobody wants to look at that nor look through something that looks like that. Okay. So those are things that you can actually find, and you will have these patients, technicians, taking a scan, and they'll blink and it'll do this, and they'll see it live on the screen. Now the scan I necessarily see may not look this bad, but my technician is coming to me telling me this patient's got dry eye. I'm like, how do you know? They're like, I took 10 images. This is the only good one I got. Okay. Why is that? Every time they blink, it's different. This person obviously has a problem. So let's talk about keratoconus a little bit, because it is certainly I think underdiagnosed in the area, and there's a lot of people out there that have need for it. What do we have going on with keratoconus? Basically, the cornea is going to thin, it's going to steepen, it's going to change that shape and drastically with the one that I just showed you there. And it comes in different stages. Okay, to stage it, basically the trend is the cornea gets steeper as it gets worse. The corneal thickness gets thinner as it gets worse. The patient's vision goes down. Where do we want to find these patients? Stage 1 would be great to get them in and get them treated because treatment is possible with corneal cross-linking. So these are things that we can look at. But what is it actually, what's going on? Well, your cornea is going from this nice normal curvature, it's pushing forward, it's bending down and out, and we get a different type of pattern known as the kissing dove pattern. So this is case 1 that I've got for you here. So this is a patient over 3 years. Went from there to there to there. Okay, great vision, not so great vision. Okay, so it took that long before the patient really noticed that their vision was changing, but we were monitoring this to consider doing treatment. Why were we monitoring it? Well, this is what the other eye looked like coming in the door. Okay, so that has some significant steepening. So the fellow eye had already progressed to that point, was corneal crosslink. We were tracking the other eye to get them early, and really we were able to get them at a stage 1 and treat them and stabilize them. But that's how that progression goes. Most likely that right eye is going to look like that left eye in about 5 years if we don't do anything. And I can't track that at the slit lamp. I can't track it with a refraction very easily, but I can track it with topography. Does anybody, a little quiz question, at what age does keratoconus, what age can keratoconus start? How young? Teens, sometimes younger. There are pediatric patients that have keratoconus. The youngest patient I've seen with suspected keratoconus 10. Okay. Now, if they get down to this point where they're losing vision at 10, what's their lifespan of vision look like? We're hanging out with us on a regular basis to figure out a way to get glasses, contact lenses, medical contact lenses, corneal transplants if things are not done. So if you have a 10-year-old that's got a lot of astigmatism, meaning anything over 2 units, somebody should think about running a topography on that patient to make sure it's normal so that you find them. All right, case number 2. This was a little bit of a puzzle. This was referred to us in from an ophthalmologist. History of LASIK, had trauma while planting one of these wonderful winter driveway stakes into the hard ground, and was described as having an abrasion that was 7 by 8 millimeters. So this was the right eye scan. Keep in mind this patient had LASIK, and myopic LASIK surgery should generally have a thinner than average cornea. We definitely see that. What we are looking at topography wise is certainly a very irregular pattern. There's nothing normal about that. Well, when it comes to doing refractive surgery, we're trying to create normalcy in its best form. So the question was, what actually happened here? What are we working on? Well, I've got the left eye up in the corner, and there we see that central flattening that we expect with a myopic LASIK procedure and a really different corneal thickness. Technician came out to me and went, this doesn't look so good. And I was looking over technician's shoulder, and I looked at him and went, what's that thickness? Well, the thickness in one eye is 550 microns, and the other eye, we're at 404. It's 140 micron difference. This is where history helps. Anybody have any idea what the average corneal thickness of a flap was in 1997? I just gave you the answer. It's 140. Okay. So this patient actually, that's the edge of their flap there, or was. All the rest of it, that 7 by 8 millimeter abrasion, this patient actually, their flap came off when they had that driveway stake. This has a happy ending. But it was all because of topography that my technicians were able to, bring this to me. Certainly I had to go have the good fortune to tell the patient what happened. But then we did high-res OCT as Terry's leaving. I think he did that scan. Appreciate you. That's no big deal. I'm fine. I just wanted to say thanks because I can't do these. I can do a lot of things. I can't take these. This little line right here, that's the remainder of that patient's flap over to the hinge, because in 1997 they also had nasal hinges. So that's why that stayed intact. So we're able to repair that. Okay, contact lenses. How do they affect your corneas? That was one of my other questions. Kind of a trick question. They can make it steeper, they can make it flatter, they can do all sorts of things. But the fact that you've got a foreign body in your eye can certainly create a different corneal shape. This patient not only comes with a steeply fit contact lens, but also a tight eyelid. Hence, we've got all this flattening up top. We've got all of this steepening on the bottom. Anybody want to refract this patient? Anybody want to do refractive surgery on this patient? No, this patient needs a washout. So in this case, when they get this severe, it's one of the more drastic cases I've ever had to manage. I said no contact lenses for 6 months to let that bounce back. In general, it takes weeks. With hard contact lenses, 6 to 8 weeks to unwind that. In a severe case, you know that you're not doing anything with that for months. But you are going to be seeing the patient back to help them out with glasses in the meantime as they do rebound and bounce back. This patient was able to go on to have a successful surgery, but we kind of had to hit the pause button on that patient. So inferior steeping is never good. Superior flattening is never good either. And this patient had all of those. So the vision's great with them in, poor vision as soon as they take them out. So the contact lens can mask a lot of that, and they're great. They're happy with it. As soon as they take it out, everything really kind of goes downhill, and that makes sense. Okay, case 4. I call this the imposter. Patient came to us diagnosed with keratoconus. This is their topography. All right, we just went through keratoconus. Does anybody agree? No. Okay, but that's what they were sent in with. And as soon as we looked at the topography, we went, okay, what's going on here? So this patient's got vision at 20/50, pinholes only down to 20/40. So we got some reduction in vision. Refraction only gets them to 20/40. So my technicians are in there pounding their head against the wall, trying to refract them. I thank you very much. I'm glad they stepped out when they did. So anybody have any thoughts? What is that? All right, it's steeper centrally, flatter around the edge, and then it kind of goes to a more normal shape. So this is central steepening, flattens out right after it. Okay, so you've got something that's there creating steepening. Could be a scar, right? Is there any trauma history, anything like that? That'd be a great question. They have corneal dystrophy. As I said, I didn't want to list all the different diseases that can happen with the cornea. Anterior basement membrane becomes a possibility. Well, in this case, looking at the slit lamp, everybody see this little fuzzy thing right here? That is anterior basement membrane dystrophy. That was the best image we could get of that. But what we now know, we know where it is. It's kind of one of those, do we need to do anything down here? No. Anything here? How about here? Yeah, take that off, right? So we took it off. And when we did that, it went from that to that. Nobody wants to refract that.
No.
Everybody wants to refract that. Okay. That guy can get the 4K TV. Okay. So about half of you get, generally about a little over half get the 2/3 of the power of the cornea, and contact lenses making it flatter. Generally, I find they make it steeper in general, just so you know, they generally make it a little bit steeper. And what we find for our practice and how we know that is when they stop wearing their contact lenses, we can find less prescription. So if you steepen a cornea, you're going to get a little bit of a myopic shift. They're going to take you on that ride. You have them stop wearing their contact lenses and it bounces right back. Okay.